You are listening to Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 91, Maintaining the Tension. Today we talk about how to maintain tension in your games. We discuss how the threat of death is often not the player's biggest motivator. We also discuss how to create tension and dive into what your players care about most. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribe and will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually this time, for the first time in a long time, Jared. How you doing today, Jared?
Yes, not bad. It is a little weird because I am in town. We just didn't have time to get together today in person.
Yeah, I've got wedding activities now that are starting to creep up. I mean, we're only about 21 days away from this thing happening. So
I can't believe that it's only 21 days. Like, that's nuts.
Yeah, it's right around the corner. So
like, Allie's already got her dress for your wedding, so she's already figured that out and ordered it.
Perfect. Well, we're very excited. We've got a lot of little itty bitty details to make the whole thing work, and then I become a Sherpa the day of the wedding to get a bunch of stuff over to our venue.
No, that's what you have a crew for.
No, we have no crew, so it's me. I have to do it. So,
what are you talking about? We'll discuss that in detail later. Because you have these things called friends who can do that for you.
All right.
You're supposed to be focusing on getting married.
Well, I mean, I am focusing on getting married, but until about 1 o'clock that day, I don't actually need to focus on getting married.
Listen, I'll be your what do we call it? For one of my for Jen's wedding, I was supposed to be Bobby's second best man. Like, I actually did the logistical shit.
Okay, well, if I need you to tackle someone, Jared, you're my man. If I need you to kick someone out, you're my man.
Well, I can also move shit.
Okay.
By the way, got a foam roller. Tried a foam roller at my brother's.
Is that helping you out? Change your life?
Oh my God. My back has not felt this good in so long. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad.
Yeah, that's for our podcast, listeners. There we go. Jared's back's feeling better. So,
well, I mean, you do complain about your back enough. I think you had the whole statement about how when you're at that age now where if you don't wake up in the morning and touch your toes, you're gonna have a bad day.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's like a foam roller a day keeps the pain at bay.
That's good.
So it's pretty nice. It's weird because I thought everything was more skeletal problems, but apparently it's a lot of muscle. So because the foam roller doesn't fix your spine. It
loosens up all the muscles around it, and you can get rid of tension that builds the lower back and stuff.
So, but getting back to podcast and role playing, what is our topic for today?
Our topic for today is one that was brought to us by Chris in a response, and that we're paying this off for you quite late, Chris. So I do apologize because this actually spawned out of our Action Economy game, which is maintaining tension in a game. Because what Chris postulated in that episode was, we often talk a lot between you and me about preparing and trying to design outcomes to be designed in a game. Okay. And that us as your players, and as we're giving here advice to people, you might have broken the fourth wall, which we just did the episode on breaking the fourth wall recently. And you might have explained to your players, I do things sometimes to keep you alive or to perpetuate your existence in my game. And
yes, I did.
That right there, that effectively is telling your players you cannot die or the fix is in for your characters. And so given that maybe is known, and again, this is different for us because we've done it, we know that you're doing it, but there's also this sort of like tacit kind of fear at the end of it, which is what I tried to explain to Chris, is I don't know when you're going to say lethality rules full on and you're not going to vocalize that to me. There's always this
very true.
There's always this thought that maybe today is the day that Jared goes, you know what? We're going full lethal. Everything you do,
you got to shoot a hostage.
There.
So they know you're being serious.
There are no takebacks. You know, and I think that's the thing is that, you know, the question is then how do you build the tension if you know the fix is in? And I'm going to start real quick with it and you can jump in. But one of the things that I have always noticed, even though I know the fix is in, and I know that you want us to get to the end of your game. I know that you're not going to let us do it through stupid means. This has always been the key, is that you won't let us do it through stupid means. If we decide that we're going to, you know, play fast and loose, you're going to cap us quick. Okay. But if we're cautious and you maybe pull punches in one combat, you come back and now we're injured out of that combat. And I don't know, like, if I don't play cautious and I go fast and loose going, I'm the hero, you know, nothing can go wrong for me, I know that you're going to get me on the other end. And it's going to happen. And if it breaks reality and immersion completely, I mean, you're probably going to get me regardless. So, you know, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I guess, you know, whether or not my players know the fix is in. Again, it's just like you said. You know, you don't know when my fix is in. You don't know. You have no idea what time I'm going to pull dice pools and what time I'm not. You know, that's why we have the storyteller screen. That's you know, or the GM divider is so you can't see my rolls. And let's be honest, if everything was on the up and up at all times, GM screens wouldn't exist. Let's admit it. I'd be rolling in front of your faces at all times. I wouldn't need a GM screen. Because, and I guess people will say it's to hide your notes. Oh, okay. That's why DMs always roll behind the screen. It's to hide their notes. No, it's the fixes in, and we all know it. Sometimes GMs pull punches specifically for the sake of story, or a player is, you know, they got a bad beat. You know what I mean? One of the ways, so you don't, numero uno, you don't know when my fix is in. And if you are doing something at someone's table where they know the fix is in, you know, you slightly let them know that the bluff is up and the tension of me dying. I mean, when it's that obvious that you are trying to keep me alive, even your players shouldn't feel good about that. Because I look at it like this. We all know I hate sports, but I'm going to use a sports analogy. You know, you got a football team and versus another football team. I don't know. The Bears versus the Cubs. I don't care.
One football team versus a baseball team. Got it. Jared's creating a whole new sport.
Bears versus the Eagles. There we go.
There you
go. I'm rooting for the Bears. I'm a ref who's on the take. Okay. I'm a ref who's betting on the side. I want my Bears to win. And my players are my Bears. I want them to win. I make a little money off that. I get a little joy in my game because my hometown team won. I can make calls that can alter the game, make it a little bit better for the Bears, you know, call that really wasn't a fumble, you know, call that, you know, the Eagles, I saw them do something bad. I can make calls that can alter it now. But in the same regard, if the Bears are just playing shitty and they're getting trounced by the Eagles, there's nothing I can really do about that. You know what I mean? If they're throwing interception after interception, or somebody standing up in the middle of firefights to exchange rounds instead of, seeking cover, I can only fub the roles so much and in a way that not everyone knows if I'm fubbing the roles. Okay. And that is something important to keep in mind, is that you shouldn't be fubbing the roles in such a manner that everyone knows you're doing it. It should be a little bit of fear in your players, like, is he fubbing the roles? Is he not fubbing the roles? Can I get whacked on this? And that small amount of tension should be enough. But like, one of the things in combat tension that the second thing I want to address, it's not just fubbing the roles. And if your players are going to play like, oh, he's just going to fub the role for my sake, and all right, shoot that hostage. Prove I ain't playing. I'm playing for points. Now, if you are legitimately trying to keep them alive, and the rolls are just going against their favor every freaking time, they're rolling critical failures every roll. Like, oh my god! And I've seen it. I've seen my players roll crappily after crappily after crappily, and it's just like, holy shit. How do I help them survive this? Because, this isn't the time, the place, the emotional climax, for a character to die. This just isn't right. It's not right in the moment. Players do value another thing besides just their characters' lives. It's having their turn. No one wants to sit there doing nothing. Think about it. When you're playing Uno and somebody plays that damn card where it skips your freaking turn, it always pisses me off. I'm always like, God damn it, because I want to play. I don't want to sit there doing nothing. I want to play. So knocking a character unconscious is always an option. You're out. Good night. You've said sayonara, peace be with you. I'm going to go take a little Betty bye, because then that player loses their turn for the rest of the combat. And it sucks. And that brings a little bit of tension, if knowing that, like, yeah, Jared might not cap characters all willy-nilly and let the chip fall where they may, but he definitely will knock your ass unconscious during combat, and then you're going to be sitting there for the rest of the combat losing out on the experience, the good time, the blah, blah, blah. But it really shouldn't be the negative effect of death that should be driving the tension of your story. Think about it. Watch a horror movie, right? There is no physical threat to me, and I have almost very little invested in the characters on the screen. Yet, for the love of God, there's some horror movies that have me sticking my fingers into the chair, right? There's some action movies where the scenes are like, oh my God, he's not going to make it. They don't have the advantage of fubbing dice rolls. There is a predetermined outcome, right? It's a movie. John Wick, it's a predetermined outcome. There's 45 minutes left of this movie, unless they're just going to do a black screen after John Wick gets killed for the next 45 minutes. I know he's going to make it through this firefight. Yet there is still tension. There's still tension in the audience. It's the suspension of disbelief. You know what I mean? And you should be reviewing that in your game if that's a system or an issue that you have to overcome, is whether or not your players are maintaining that suspension of disbelief, getting some tension involved. Because I'll say this much, it's really hard in a horror game. It is, especially because I love doing horror. It's very difficult because one of the scary parts of horror is the potential to die, right? But if we're the first session in, my players are going to have very low expectation of dying. So it's incumbent on the storyteller to find other ways to build tension, whether or not that be through use of music, use of pacing, use of critical wounds. You know what I mean? There should be something else driving the tension of your players besides the threat of death to their characters. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. I think that's
because I've worked with storytellers that had no compulsion clipping characters. I've worked in LARP, or not worked in, but played in LARP, where other players are actively just seeking to clip motherfuckers. You know what I mean? They're just actively seeking to, because they had a bad week at work. They're like, I'm gonna take it out on somebody, right? And so what do? They go around and find some low level character to clip. I did not have a level of tension in those stories. Like I can remember the one storyteller that I played under for very many years. We've talked about him a lot. He had no compulsion about clipping characters. He had zero regard, because to him the story was just an afterthought. You know what I mean? It was more about just playing and having fun and all that. Well, I mean, like, not that that's a bad thing, but getting together and doing some cool action scenes. Did I ever really have tension in his game? I can honestly report no. I mean, that's one of the reasons I stopped playing under him. It's because his games weren't that impressive. I was never like, oh my God, what's going to happen next week? You know, I mean, for example, let's take, for example, what's going on right now. Aaron has really made this fantastic story, right? I cannot wait for the next week. I'm really, it's been very sad for me that we've had to take, a couple of breaks.
It's almost about a month off. I mean, we've really had a lot of time off.
I mean, this week, Brian, he has his in-laws over. Last week, I was in Los Angeles visiting my brother. The week before that, I forget what happened. It was an afternoon game. And for some odd reason, it just wasn't going to work out. And then a week before that, and it's like Aaron's got this miraculous story that I'm chomping at the bit to get to the end of, because not even to the end, but to the next session, because I have this theory that I'm not going to tell Aaron. But guess what? Aaron does know. I know that Aaron uses some of my techniques and tactics. I know that he probably might flub a roll or two behind the storyteller screen. He might do that. But here's the thing. I don't know when he's doing it. And to be perfectly honest, the story that surrounds the game, okay, the want to get to the next level of the story, to figure out what the hell is going on, and to save the life of the person who's hired us, because Aaron chose very wisely an NPC that we had dealt with several times in writings. Really just drives me to want to play this game every week, and actually drives me to like a little bit of sadness when we don't get to. I really am dying to know the end of this story. It's not the threat of it's interesting. It's not the threat of my character dying that gives me right, gets my heart clenched and my teeth on set. It's literally because we have been off for a month with this game. It's that Aaron has lost passion in his game. That's my biggest concern. Aaron, I can see his face right now. I can see that's not the case, but I'm like, shit, what if Aaron's just like, you know what, guys, it's been a month. I'm going to put it on the back burner. I need to know.
No, you're getting an ending. Don't worry. You're getting an ending.
Yeah, Aaron has built this story that I have to know what's going on. I need the best ending. I am tense because we have a certain amount of time to save the good guy. But Aaron's got like 7 different stories going on in this one different story. And I'm like, how the fuck are we going to solve all 7 stories in the time to save the one guy? And that's the tension. Aaron had this great scene where this guy was on top of one of the bridges in New York, and they're throwing fireballs, and it didn't, in that moment, because Aaron had created the scene with music, with great storytelling, telling us about how the flame hits the cars, and Brian breaks to the left to save somebody out of a vehicle. That is what's building the tension. I'm not in that moment wondering, is Aaron following rules? And even if he was, does it really matter? If it matters so much for your players, and to address something else that was there, everything's different from every table. Absolutely true. It's different from other players. All we can do is give advice on what we've experienced over 20 years of storytelling and playing. But my advice in this situation would be to really examine what is bringing tension to your game. Is it the threat of death? I'll kill your character. That's why you should be afraid. No, you should be afraid because I'm putting something in your mind's eye that scares you.
I think that's a great...
It terrifies you.
I think it's a great point. You actually hit on a lot of really good stuff there. Again, it depends on your game. So, I mean, if your game is like you're in a battle royale situation, kind of gladiator style tournament, then the threat in that game, the way that you've established that game, is very much you can be killed and you are fighting for your life, literally. Okay? That is the threat within that game. Again, maybe this comes from a different place because of the D&D backgrounds that we're typically trying to communicate with. And maybe this is just a storytelling, maybe two different system kind of mesh over problem that we have here. In D&D, everything is a very defined stat line, and it's very much a la, a video game. I mean, almost every modern RPG is based off of D&D mechanics in terms of like how your hit percentages versus your dodge percentage, and how random that sort of roll is. And so it's supposed to be very tactical in that kind of nature. And again, D&D, as we've said many times before, spawned out of wargaming with wargame pieces. So the threat and the concept behind the game is very much, there's a heavy amount of lethality to your characters, and you're playing for keeps in terms of like, if you don't strategically work together and figure this out, you're going to die. Okay? And so there is a very big threat at every moment within D&D. And I know that in older versions of D&D, it's even worse. It's even harder, like, to see, like, level 3 characters in AD&D is an accomplishment. Okay? But I think when you start coming into sort of the modern era of D&D, and I've played D&D 5e, and I've played, we've done a lot of White Wolf, and I'm playing now in a 7th Sea game, and they're all very different games, don't get me wrong. The thing that drives tension and the thing that makes you excited every moment, it's not just the fear that you're going to die, it's the nuances and the storytelling techniques that you put behind it. Okay, it means nothing to have your character die in a story that you have no investment in. Okay, that threat means nothing. If I tell you a story about you being part of a guild and you go out and you slay monsters and that's all you do, okay, you might get a real kick out of that because you like the combat, you like to kind of play around the combat, all of that. But in terms of your character dying, okay, good, throw that one out. Let's just make a new one. Okay, if I build you a story in a world where, we talked about the progression game for Gary a couple of weeks ago. If I tell you a story about you progressing and creating this kind of like world and kind of growing and blossoming into something, that's sort of where we are with the game and sort of I would call it more of an advanced storytelling technique, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the players into a level of, you want the players to, one, care about their survivability. So they go in, they threat assess everything, not just a combat, but a social situation, a mental situation, You want your characters, I mean, like the threat of like, let's say your characters built a guild there, or like that was the end of your kind of culmination of your start of your story. Your players came together, and then now like somebody's coming and like you've got money problems. So now you do have to kind of like, you have this threat coming in that's now coming in and taking away something that you have. It has nothing to do with taking away your character's life. Your character will survive, and you can go on and, you know, grind dungeons and, you know, earn gold and do whatever. But if your characters are invested to liking that piece or that thing that you've given them, Jared does this masterfully with our NPCs. Is he finds NPCs that we attach to, and then Jared uses them. That's the tension, is that he threatens the NPCs. Okay, and the thought of losing the NPC is almost worse than the thought of losing your character. The thought of losing your character can always come into a game, and I think that you always want to kind of explore those, like when you're doing a scary scene. Like that's how you're trying to threaten the characters, is that the terror is that, oh my God, something is lurking in the darkness and it will murder me. But I think that when you're trying to build the tension everywhere else, you're trying to build scenes that feel intense and scenes that make it feel like, you know, even though you know the fix is in you, that the GM wants you to get to the end of this story, which is what we're trying to accomplish. I want you to get to the end of the story. I'm not trying to throw so much damage at you that you come limping across the finish line. Okay? I might do that, but I think that in the way that I've built tension in that game specifically that you're speaking of is I gave you a 3-day time limit, and I've given you tons and tons of stories. Okay? And it just your biggest constraint right now is that you're driving around in New York, and to get from point A to point B can take an hour, 2 hours, depending on where you're going in New York. And it's impossible for you to be at all places at all times, because I have events happening at the same time. So you have to choose where you want to go. And that is immensely tense, and then you only have right now like 12 hours before the guy's supposed to die in the game. And you're less concerned about the well-being of your characters, but more concerned about how are we going to accomplish this right now. And that's the tension in the game. So in the scene that you talked about where I was throwing fireballs and we had the man who was on fire and he was erupting like a volcano, and, you know, it was raining down upon you, you guys got hit during that scene. You guys didn't care necessarily about the damage that you took during that scene. But the fear of, you know, walking basically into like an erupting volcano, that was the fear. The fear was, I'm walking into an erupting volcano. Do you know if I'm fudging anything? No. Do you necessarily care? No, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to accomplish something in that moment. You're trying to save people on the bridge. You're trying to approach this person because you feel like there is a story thread or a strand at the other end of this, and you're going to do that come hell or high water. And so at that moment, you are totally immersed in the game, that just about anything I do outside of the game in that moment is, you know, we almost don't even need roles to make that work, but the roles do build the tension. The roles make it feel like, oh my God, more tension's coming down upon me. Okay. And that's what you have to understand, is that even if the roles are fudged and you can't see the roles, the tension of what the outcome of that role may be, because I don't know. It's a gamble every time. Like, I mean, maybe every role player is secretly a huge, you know, like hugely addicted to gambling, because you want to feel that next moment, that next hit of dopamine as the GM rolls behind the screen and he misses you narrowly with an attack. And like, you know,
True.
There's all of that kind of going on. And the best parts of the tension is the tension between players, when a player is like, I'm going to go do X, and the other player is like, no, oh God, no, don't do that. Like, please, anything but that. Like, and it's the fear that things are going to go so sideways that the players won't be able to continue. I think that's the problem.
That's a nail on the head. It's the fear that we're not going to get to the end of the story, or get to the outcome that we want. Brian and I want the full Monty. We want to know everything. We want to succeed in everything, and we might not. And it has nothing to do with player death. It is literally, are we picking the right path to accomplish all these tasks within the time limit set? And Aaron's built a ton of tension with that. And it has nothing. Our characters aren't even in peril. Like the person who's going to get killed at the end of these 3 days isn't us. It's someone else. But Brian and I are so invested in the story and everything that's been going on and the mystery that's wrapping around everything and how and why certain things are doing certain things, is just been immensely awesome. I mean, to use another example from Aaron's game, because he's really doing a just fucking out of the park job. There was a scene where reality got broke and people were jumping, walking up walls and people were trying to kill us. And I was so immersed in what was going on in the scene. The scene was so interesting to me. The roles were not my primary concern. My primary attention was on the story and what was going on around me. And it's almost like a magician's trick. Don't look here, look over here. Aaron had created a scene with so much tension and was so interesting and so much fun. I wasn't thinking about the roles. I was thinking about what's going on around me. It was the magician's trick. Don't look here, look over here. And if your game, as Aaron brought up in a point, if your game is a gladiator game, now, some people might say, well, that's the game my table wants. Then if the game that your table wants is that fear of death, the whole thing about this podcast is leveling up your game, trying to bring up those players into more diverse stories, because what happens the day that you want to play, I bring up this system all the time.
Tales from the Loop one?
Tales from the Loop. You're playing kids in that game system. Like, no more, you're not supposed to play like anyone over the age of 16. Okay? They don't have a death meter. You don't have health levels like you do in D&D and White Wolf and stuff like that. They have it's kind of like stress, and finally, when your character, even if they get shot, it's okay. You moved above your stress levels, and now your character's out for 3 days. Because he's just too stressed out. I got shot and I can't take it anymore. And their threat is that you don't get to play your character in the story. You don't get to go through with the story because your character's too stressed out, and they have to return to like their safety something or other. I didn't really read it too much. They got to go back to their house or their tree house for X amount of time, so you don't get to play for a little bit. Or it gets to create an emotional scene between two players, where the other one climbs up into the treehouse to talk to you until someone moves you out of your stress high. So it's incumbent on the other players to make that scene of like, I go up into the treehouse and I talk to you as you sit there and listen and you get to have that emotional scene between two players. And then finally you come out of the treehouse and can rejoin the rest of the group in the adventure and the mystery. It's a whole system that doesn't even have a character death aspect. Yet, I mean, it won awards. You know what I mean? Other, much more versed and, I don't know. Groups of critics have hailed this system, and they're professional critics. It doesn't even have a death counter. You can't die in that game unless it matches with the story. And that just goes to show that tension doesn't have to come from death. It shouldn't be only coming from death. Tension should be coming from, I don't get to hear the rest of the story. And that's when you've really hit a pinnacle point, because you've drawn your players in so much that death is no longer the worst thing. The worst thing is not hearing the end of the story. And my God, if I've ever hit that, awesome. That just made my day because think about it when role playing started and what role playing always I guess looks back to its roots of telling stories around a campfire. You know what I mean? It's the sorry kids, you got to go to bed. You know, that was the worst. Oh no, we want to hear the end of the story. Are you kidding
that's
me?
when you throw in your cliffhangers and your other things like that to keep your players immersed into the next part of it, where your players then demand more. In terms of actual techniques that you can use that are not just storytelling techniques, because storytelling techniques are probably your best way to maintain the tension. I talked about rolling being a way to actually facilitate tension in a scene. Rolling works as long as you roll fast. Imposing stress upon your players and maintaining pace is the key. Otherwise, rolling loses all tension.
Yes.
Okay? If you're like, okay, and now it's Jared's turn to roll. Okay, Jared, go ahead and roll me your attack roll, please. Okay? There's no tension in that.
Can I build upon that actually? Because that's a great example. I'd like to build upon that. You know, imagine you got a table like the DM Dojo guys. I can't believe they sometimes have games like with like 32 freaking people or something like it's ridiculously huge. I cannot imagine the speed at which, because if somebody's in a scene where they're almost getting, you know, let's take the bad guys trying to drive a knife into their sternum and you're holding up their arm from driving it in, and then they got to go through 32 players until your next action. I would love them to explain how they do that and keep tension alive. You know, because they're doing it. They're keeping the tension alive. I haven't asked them. I should probably ask them how they do that. Because Aaron's right. The pacing of rolling. If you tell me I've got a knife at my sternum and then I've got to wait 45 minutes for my next freaking roll, guess what? My tension left my body about 10 minutes ago, or about 30 minutes ago.
Maintaining pace is so critical to maintaining the tension in a combat, in any scene. Okay, in a chase. Chases often go sideways and don't have any tension to them because you can't move it fast enough. It's rolling for the sake of like I'm going to catch up to you sort of thing. And you have to throw you have to throw in other elements that make this very tense. So like we've talked often about social aspect. I'll bring it all three phases here. We talk about the social aspect. Okay, even if your character is even if your player is a god at with a silver tongue and just can say whatever. Okay, even in any situation, you always make them roll at some point during there because it builds the tension that no matter how good of a talker they are, they're going to be met by some resistance here in this scene, and that tension could swing your player to ask more questions and feel like the best part about it is not knowing whether or not you succeed or fail behind that roll. Sometimes if you succeed, it's always nice to know I succeeded, but if I failed, not knowing if I failed makes that even harder. It makes the tension hard because then your players start double working sort of to try and make sure like they can re-ask the questions or they can re-dig into the lie.
You do not detect a lie.
Which is great because you know one of our common problems was that you do not detect a lie, but also
it was the system that worked too well.
That affirmed things, but the whole point is that if you succeed, you should know that there is no lie. Okay? But if you fail, you do not detect a lie. Okay? And every now and then you might think, okay, well, does that mean, or you can even say it, you can give the same positive affirmation as a negative affirmation, where if you say, he's not lying, and then they roll and they fail, and you go, he's not lying. And so now I'm like doubled down into that kind of weird tension kind of moment there where I'm like, do I ask him more questions about this? Do I take his word for it? Like, it's not like he outright beat me in an action. I just didn't beat him. Okay, so like that's a way that you end up building tension there, especially when you're talking to people who you know are bad people, or you know have like critical information, or when you start to like learn the information and you're trying to pin somebody down with it. Like those make for very, very tense scenes. Okay,
They do.
because you're kind of staring the enemy in the face and having like a sort of amicable conversation with them to try to get them to slip up. Okay, that's one way that rolling in that scene works. In combat or in a chase or something of that nature, when you're rolling the dice, it is super important to be fast in what goes on. So I have my enemy attack Jared. He narrowly misses you because that's how the rolls go. Okay, Jared's action immediately. I go, Jared, what do you do? And then Jared comes up and he describes what he's going to do to the person. Also, it gives kind of your players more of a narrative joust in there to try to describe the kind of the craziness of what they're going to try to accomplish in it. But really, the time between when he rolls the dice and I roll the dice, I should be rolling the dice immediately if I'm going in active, if I'm playing active defensive games. But if you're going, if you're in passive defensive games like a D&D, for example, Jared rolls, I should know immediately, like, okay, you miss. And like, or I immediately go into a narrative describing what went wrong with that roll if you miss, or if you hit, you cleave him, I go damage. Like what's your damage? I try to move at a very deliberate pace to make sure that nothing is missed. We're not dropping a beat, and then I'm not sitting there going like, okay, so who's next? All right. And like, I know who's next. I've got the turn order. I'm calling people out. I'm saying, your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn. Okay, my bad guys. Boom. And while they're all doing their stuff, I might have already rolled for all of my bad guys. I've already predetermined their outcomes and their actions. And, determined who's going to get what. And so suddenly the bad guy action happens, and it's like a flurry of craziness. And like all this stuff happens, and you're like, it's just like you're just rolling. You're like, oh my god, like he's already attacked me. It's already happening. So like the speed has to be there to make that tension work. The speed of you guys encroaching upon the volcano guy worked because I had you roll constantly. Like, and yes. I didn't require a lot of successes to eventually get to him. And so like you knew you only needed like 2 or 3 successes to get to him. And none of you, but you guys kept botching your rolls or getting below rolls or barely moving. And it's like, it's almost like if you're trying to like walk across a room and like you're walking across a tightrope in the room, and at one time you finally succeed and you make it all the way across the tightrope, and the other times you're just kind of like teetering and balancing on a tightrope. I mean, it wasn't a lot that you needed, but it was enough to build that tension.
It was, and I mean, Aaron's right. Pace of rolling is a huge success to very successful as I have found to keeping tension up during combat scenes, even when I'm fudging the roll. But it's in the end, I want you to look at, because there's one other scene I want to examine, and it was one of our first scenes in our second iteration of the detective series. We were on a train, and Aaron has once described the scene where his character was trying to keep a conductor from slipping under the train. And I created a scene in which Aaron's character was, first a threat, and then it was this guy who's at threat. And it's not about the character at that point. My question is, if there was no tension in that maneuver, what did I do wrong to make Aaron not care about that NPC that he slipped under the tracks? Tension can be created from so many sources besides the fear of death. What is going on in my game? I would sit back and say, if the only threat, the only thing that my characters care about is how many hit points they have and how many hit points my bad guys have, where am I going wrong? Where where am I not pushing the story to them just wanting to know the next scene, wanting to get to the next scene, and think about it. We sit around and play video games that make us tension, that we play card games that give us tension. And there's that cheer of success, and there's that feeling of defeat and loss. And there is no chance of physical demise in Uno, last I checked. No one, unless you're playing like Russian roulette Uno or something like that. But and yet there is that tension. And so you have to look at the very many sources of tension, and really say, where else can I make my players? How else can I make my players? Because tension comes from caring, I guess. That's there we go. Tension comes from caring about things. I care about this story. I care about this scene. I care about the other players. I care about this. If you don't care, no matter what you do, there will be no tension. It was just like in the game with the storyteller that, I've said, we'll call him Bill. With Bill, it was, I was never really invested in the story. The other NPCs, all they loved to do was PvP. So like, I wasn't really about saving anybody else's life but my own. Because $10 says that they would rather kill me than another.
They'd murk you for a ham sandwich, Jared.
They would murk me for a ham sandwich. There was no other tension because there was no other care. You got to create the care. You create the care, the tension will naturally flow. And then you can just do things to augment it, like upping the pace, doing little special techniques using music, doing stuff like that. But first, you got to create the care. There's no care, there is no tension.
Well said. Do you have anything you want to add to this one?
No, I'm very satisfied. I think it was a great question. I really enjoyed answering it as best I can. No, I'm very satisfied.
All right. Well, we hope that maybe shedded some light on how we kind of do that, Chris. Again, great question from you. Really appreciate it. Because you're right. It every table is different. And, just a good kind of thought experiment into kind of how we do that. So we'll kind of keep that in mind going forward and with our other podcasts, and be able to put that together. But if you enjoyed the podcast, you can get us or contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. We are also on YouTube.
So first get people to care about the podcast and then have them smash the like button.
Done. Also, please go ahead and rate, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the podcast. We have new great content coming out. A little forewarning: I did mention this in our preview episode a couple weeks ago that the next couple of weeks I'm hoping to have podcasts, but I am getting married in a couple of weeks, so there might be a week when we don't have a podcast coming up. Just a forewarning. So.
How dare you get married?
Yes, but otherwise, go ahead and share this with your friends. We do appreciate you listening, and that's going to wrap us up for the week. So for Jared, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week, everyone.